Hello, I'm Chef Julia Dunaway, and I make plant-based dishes that I hope you like. I sure, do my best to make them taste good. And today I'm making plant-based macaroni and cheese. And in fact, I already have some made. So this is what I'm going to be making today. It's the mac and cheese I made for the State Fair of Texas. And it was really popular. People liked it. I posted pictures of it. And everyone said, well, show us how you made it. So that's what I'm going to do today. And I made this earlier because I was doing a short video. So, those short videos. So now I'm going to get ready to make it all over again. So the first step is to make the sauce. And the sauce is not that complicated, but it does have quite a few ingredients when you put it all together. So I'm going to start with 1.5 cups of vegetable stock. You can make your own or buy it store-bought. I have the store-bought version for today because I made a lot of this. I had to make 150 servings of it for the State Fair of Texas. That's a lot. So 1.5 cups of vegetable stock, and then I'm going to add 2 cups of Yukon gold potatoes or gold potatoes. And I'll start with that. I've already peeled the potatoes. Watching somebody peel potatoes is kind of boring. So I've already got them peeled. And these are just a bag of gold potatoes from Costco because I bought a 10-pound bag. Normally I would just get the Yukon gold potatoes in the regular grocery store. And you only need, depending on the size, 4 or 5, maybe a few more. And I'm cutting them up kind of small because I want them to cook fast. I don't want to have to worry about waiting a long time for the potatoes to cook. So I'm measuring them out because, like I said, I want 2 cups. Get 1 cup in. And I've got the stock already heating up because I have to bring it to a boil and let it simmer for about 20 minutes when I add the other ingredients. So get these potatoes in. So mac and cheese with potatoes. That sounds kind of strange to some of you. Now I know some of you have probably made some cheese sauces that use things like potatoes and carrots and different vegetables. So this is another version similar to some of those other ones out there. Okay, I got my 2 cups of potatoes in there, and that just took, what was that? Just a couple of potatoes. It didn't really take that many. And then we're going to add the butternut squash. So butternut squash looks like this. And it can be a little hard to work with. What I do with it is I peel it with the vegetable peeler. Just go around and peel it with the vegetable peeler, cut it, and then cut it into cubes. And that works really well. And then you can buy it. Now this is a Costco thing. You can buy butternut squash in a grocery store. So I'm going to use 1 cup of that. And normally I wouldn't buy already cut up butternut squash because, I don't really like it already prepared, to tell you the truth. It's a lot fresher to just do your own. And there's nothing wrong with this. It looks fine. But I always buy the whole thing and then cut it up myself. But like I said, I had to make 150 servings of this. So it was a lot easier to get the prepared type than for me to go and do it myself. And then we're going to put in 1/4 cup. This is 1/2 cup, so I'm going to put half of this in here. Remember, I said I made this earlier today, so I have these ingredients, some of them already kind of semi-prepared. So I've got my onions, potatoes, and butternut squash in this 1.5 cups of vegetable broth. And I'm going to bring it to a boil as quickly as possible. Probably got it on the wrong burner to do that. I'm going to put it over here on the bigger burner. Bring it to a boil and let it simmer for 20 minutes. And while it's simmering, then, I'll go on to the next step, but I'll talk about the rest of the ingredients first. And I'm using macaroni, and this macaroni is whole wheat elbow macaroni from Organics. This is like an Albertsons, which is a local grocery store in Texas. So that's the one I'm using, and it works fine. You can use any kind of pasta that you like. It doesn't have to be whole wheat pasta, but because I use the whole food plant-based no oil way of eating, then I would tend to use whole wheat pasta. And this one is actually a pretty good one. And I made 8 ounces of pasta. So cook your pasta. You could cook it ahead. I think I have a lid around here somewhere. Thought that'll make this cook a little faster. So I only made 8 ounces of pasta, but you can double this and have a pound of pasta and the same amount of sauce, really. It just depends on how much you want it to have sauce on it and how saucy you want it to be. I've done it both ways and it worked fine either way. But for today, I'm making the full amount of sauce and a half a pound of macaroni, just because I have so much of this around. Remember, I have that one, and I made this Sunday, and it's only Tuesday, so guess what I've been eating Sunday and Monday? And, you know, I mean, as much as I love my food, you know, it gets kind of tiring after a while, you know? Not to say that you will get tired of it, but you will if you ate so much of it. Although, you know, there are people now, it's come to, well, I'm gonna let it simmer for 20 minutes. You know, there are people who eat the same thing every day and they never get tired of it. I'm not one of those people. Okay, so the other ingredients, I'll just kind of go through them, is we have our macaroni. I already made it. Boiled it for 8 minutes. That was what the brand said. And I'm always very careful about not overcooking pasta, because overcooked pasta gets too soft and it doesn't taste good. So I always check it before the 8 minutes is up. And what you want is when you chew it, you should have some body and texture to it. It shouldn't be soft. So I tend to err on the side of taking it out before it's fully cooked, even less than what the package says. Because my experience with it is the pasta continues to kind of cook after it stops cooking. It kind of keeps swelling up. So take it out a little early and you won't be sorry. Okay, so I've got the pasta ready. And then what are some of the other ingredients I'm going to be using? I've got my tray over here. So this particular dish has a lot of ingredients that you wouldn't really think about being in macaroni and cheese. It has the butternut squash, for example, and potatoes. And it does have cashews, but it doesn't have very many. It has half a cup of cashews. These have already soaked for a couple of hours. It's not very much. You could probably leave the cashews out altogether and you wouldn't even notice it. It'll taste good without them. But the cashews give it that little extra creaminess, so I like to add them. But a substitute for the cashews would be to add a half a cup of white beans. So if you're watching nuts or don't like to eat nuts, then substitute with half a cup of beans. We're also going to be using some mushrooms, cremini mushrooms, and I'm going to be sauteing those up. I'll show you here in a few minutes. Tomato. That's an odd ingredient, but this recipe uses fresh tomato, just one. And then I have some different spices, and I'll be showing you the spices and adding them as we get a little further along. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and let this finish cooking, and after 20 minutes, when this is nice and soft, I'm going to add the other ingredients, and then we're going to blend it in the blender and then move on to the next step. Okay, it's been about not quite 20 minutes, more like 15 minutes, and I checked on the potatoes, and I could tell they were done because they're very soft. You just take one and poke it with a fork, and it starts to kind of fall apart. You know it's done. And I'm just going to pour this whole thing in my blender. And it's really not a terrible amount to put in the blender. It's not too much. Like, you have to be careful when you put a lot of stuff in your blender. You don't want to overfill it, because if you do, it can kind of shoot up and, you know, like pop the lid off and make a huge mess, and you don't want that. So, you know, don't overdo it. We'll put that in the blender. And remember, we have our cashews, half a cup. They've already been soaked. And then we're going to add a teaspoon of tamari. That wasn't quite a teaspoon. Let me put a couple more drops in. That was a little extra I had from my other demo. This is low sodium tamari, and it's good. I like it. And then I'm going to put in about a teaspoon of lemon juice. So I'm just going to squeeze it into my little container here in case some seeds come out. I don't want to get a bunch of seeds in it. So just a teaspoon or so. That seems about right. And if there's a seed in there, I'm just going to kind of pick it out. And there was just one little tiny seed in there. All right, get this out of the way. And then we have some different spices. And you can be free to substitute spices you don't like For example, I'm putting in 1/4 teaspoon of paprika, and I'll put in about 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. But when it comes to the cayenne pepper, if you don't love cayenne pepper, and some people have a real sensitivity to spices and they hate it, then don't put a lot in. I just sprinkle a little in. A little goes a long way. I've had situations where people have overdone it on the cayenne pepper and it ruined a dish. It just takes over. Okay, 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, or in my case, I'm using a product called Tofu Scramble seasoning. And it's just nutritional yeast. It has a little black salt and turmeric in it, and garlic powder, which we already put in. So if you don't have this, then you can just use regular old nutritional yeast, 2 tablespoons, a pinch of turmeric, and a pinch of black salt. Black salt is kala namak, and it's a common ingredient in tofu scramble and things where you're trying to get more of an umami flavor from your sauce. It kind of gives it this kind of richness that people are looking for. And it's not hard to find. You can order it on Amazon. You can find it in different places. Okay, so that's all our sauce ingredients. And I'm going to take it over here and excuse the noise. We got to blend this up until it's nice and smooth. It won't take long. Start it on low. Take long. You saw when I was picking the tamper tool up, that's because I could see that it was getting smooth by looking at that tool. As soon as it got smooth, that tool looked really, I could see it on there. So that's a good way to know when your sauce is nice and smooth. You don't have to take it out and test it. You can kind of just look at the blender tool. And then I have this kind of scraper, and I'm going to add this directly to the macaroni. So I'm just going to scrape it off of here. And I have my macaroni in my 10-inch dish. And I'm just going to put it in here. Why not? But you see, this is a lot of sauce for 8 ounces of macaroni. Did we really need this much sauce? No, but I didn't want to make a pound of macaroni because then I would have so much. So I thought, well, we'll see what happens if I make all the sauce with half the macaroni. And it's actually kind of good. I think it's great. I don't have a problem with it. You probably wouldn't either. But if you want to stretch it further, you know, use more macaroni. But you see, look at how saucy it is. And it's nice and hot because we made it with hot ingredients. Ooh, well, it sure does have, there's a lot of sauce to macaroni, but that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. So let's finish up the rest of our ingredients. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to saute up some mushrooms. I know that sounds weird. You have to have mushrooms in your mac and cheese. Some people will say, why ruin a good dish? But you know, in the plant-based world, things like mushrooms, you know, the G-bombs, onions and mushrooms and broccoli and all those healthy greens and healthy vegetables, you know, people want to eat that kind of stuff. So why not add it to our mac and cheese? And especially since it kind of disappears in the mac and cheese and you don't even really notice it, but it actually adds that little bit of meatiness that people are always looking for, because people that don't eat plant-based often say they miss the texture of chicken and turkey and stuff they used to eat. Well, mushrooms can kind of give you the same feeling that you used to get when you bit into, you know, some chicken or turkey or something. It's chewy. So that's why it's also good to add mushrooms. We're going to add about 8 ounces of mushrooms. I've got my skillet turned on. It's getting hot. Let me get it a little bit higher. And then we'll get these in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to brown up these mushrooms. And I'm also going to add a fresh tomato. Now that sounds weird too, doesn't it? Tomato, mushrooms to the mac and cheese, but you'd be surprised. There's something about this combination of ingredients that really makes it good. So, do you have to use these ingredients? I know some people they're always asking me, well, I don't like this, and I don't like that. What could I have instead of this, and what could I have instead of that? So I actually thought about that ahead of time, and I wrote down in my recipe that you could also try other vegetables such as zucchini or broccoli or carrots, but be sure and cook them, okay? If you add raw broccoli, carrots, or zucchini at the end, which is where I add the mushrooms and tomatoes, they're not going to taste good. So make sure you steam them up a little bit, okay? Don't just add raw vegetables to something that's cooked because you're not going to like it. So I'm going to let these mushrooms cook down for a bit and then come back, and at the very last minute I'm going to add my fresh tomatoes, and then we'll incorporate it into the hot macaroni and cheese. So for the mushrooms, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let them cook until they release their own juices. They don't need any liquid. However, if they start to dry out and they start sticking to the pan, what I'm going to do is I've got some vegetable broth here. It's the kind I brought to my cooking demo. So I needed a lot of it. So I bought store-bought vegetable broth, which I kind of like it. I use the organic vegetable broth from the supermarket, and it's fine. But let's say these start to stick. I'll just show you what I'll do. After a few minutes, I'll just splash a little bit, not a lot, of the vegetable stock because I don't want them to burn and stick to the pan. Now, the mistake I see people making is they've heard that they have to use vegetable stock or water like you'd use oil, and they add a bunch to the pan, and then they add their vegetable, and the vegetables steam, and they have no flavor. So we'll let these cook for a few minutes and then come back and assemble everything, and it'll be ready to go. Okay, the mushrooms are done. Turn the heat back on, and I'm going to add, like I said, the tomato. And with the tomato, I'm not going to use the inside part of the tomato where all the seeds are because that's pretty wet, and I don't want to introduce all the tomato seed water into my macaroni and cheese. So I just kind of cut around the edges of the tomato and then leave the seeds in the middle, and then I can just chop the tomato up easily. Very few of the wet part remains, just a little bit. And I'm just chopping them up into, let's say, 1/4 inch slices. And that way, they're small enough that they kind of disappear into the macaroni and cheese. But again, we've added something that has nutrients, a tomato, lycopene, it's a fruit. So, color. So then we have mushrooms, tomatoes. In the sauce, we had butternut squash. We had onions. So we're getting a lot of really nice things in this supposedly, decadent macaroni and cheese, but it's got all this other good stuff. So you could imagine how you could improve on it by adding other vegetables. Like, I don't think anything would be wrong with adding some broccoli, or some people like peas. So you could add a few green peas or some chopped up carrots or, green beans, zucchini, so like I said earlier, you could add other vegetables and it would be good. Sneak them in there. Okay, so now I'm going to mix in this tomato and mushrooms. And I cooked the mushrooms for about 5 minutes. It wasn't very long. Just enough so that they're wilted and cooked. They don't have to be cooked to death. Just cook them lightly. Then they mix in here really well. And if you wanted to, you could have put the mushrooms in before the sauce and just set them on top of the macaroni and then pour the sauce over them. It doesn't really matter at this point. So there it is. It's the mushrooms, the tomatoes, that cheese sauce that had some vegetables in it. And then you have a really nice dish of macaroni and cheese. If you feel like the sauce is too thick, you could always add a little bit more vegetable broth. I think this is just about right. Now, other things I added when I made this for my cooking demo is I added some chopped up scallions, green. Remember, I have red and green and brown and orange and some more green and cilantro, finely chopped cilantro. This is left from my demo at the State Fair of Texas. I had tons of this, so I'm using it. And then last but not least is the topping. And I'll talk about that for a minute. I'm not making it in front of you because I made it earlier today and I have so much of it. And it's just like, I don't want to make more. It's just too much to think about. This topping, it's going to be in the show notes and the recipe. I'm calling it Chorizo Crumbles. And basically all it is raw cashews, just like the type I used for the sauce. And I took the raw cashews, and I'm putting quite a bit on here because this is a key ingredient in the dish. You can put as much or as little as you want. But I took the raw cashews and I put my food processor up already. I just made them into crumbs in the food processor, just regular old crumbs, nothing fancy. And then I just mixed the crumbs with a little bit of tahini, tablespoon of tahini, some chipotle chili powder, pinch of paprika, a pinch of salt, a pinch of cayenne pepper, just a little pinch of cayenne pepper. Mixed it all up, laid it out on a sheet pan like this. I still have my sheet pan from this morning. I laid it on this and I cooked it in the oven it was a total of about 7 minutes, but you have to watch it because anything made with nuts can burn fast. So that was all that I did with that. So that's the final topping for the mac and cheese. The other thing I like to do is I have a lot of these growing in my garden. These are Fresno chilies. You can buy these in the grocery store. They're like a jalapeno pepper that's matured until it's red, but it's a different kind of pepper, but it kind of looks like a jalapeno pepper. But they're not as spicy. They're more mellow. They have a better taste, I think. So I use them a lot because I grow them from seeds every year, and I have tons of them that I need to find something to do with because I have so many. Okay, so here we go. This is the finished mac and cheese dish, just like the one I made for the State Fair of Texas. And, we can serve some up. First of all, the finished dish is really pretty. It's, got a lot of different colors, and it's got a really nice texture. If you look at it, it's nice and creamy, and this is extra creamy because I had more sauce and less pasta. So you don't have to make it quite this creamy, but we can taste it. It's really good. And one thing that's good about it is the pasta's not overcooked. Okay, that's a key factor, is don't overcook your pasta. And then you don't have to bake this in the oven. All right, it's not necessary to bake it in the oven. You could put it in the oven briefly just to warm it up, but if you keep it in the oven for very long, the sauce will kind of be absorbed into the macaroni and it will kind of dry out. So I found that I enjoyed it a lot better to just make it hot and fresh. Like make your sauce, pour the sauce over the macaroni, and then eat it with the toppings. This is not a baked macaroni and cheese dish. So then if you make it and you're not going to eat it all at one time, I would still mix it all together because, I just would. And then I would just be careful when you heat it up. Don't try to heat it up in the microwave on high. Heat it up add a little liquid to it, a little broth. Heat it gently, like I use the microwave, but heat it at 50% power, not 100% power. Or heat it up in a little skillet with a little bit of broth so that it gets the liquid comes out and it's not dry. So either way, another thing you can do is save the pasta and the sauce separately when you get ready to eat it, heat up the sauce, heat up the pasta briefly, and then put it together at the last minute. That's a really good way to serve this for leftovers. But you know, this is not going to be around very long if you make it, because everybody's going to love it and they're going to eat it, and you're not going to have any leftovers to worry about. That's what I think. So I hope you make this dish. This was my State Fair mac and cheese with the chorizo crumble. People could not believe that it was plant-based. They thought it was really good, had a lot of flavor. They enjoyed it. My husband, Steve, who's not plant-based, he enjoyed it too. So I hope you make it. The recipe will be in the show notes. I did also a short video, so I will post that in the short section of YouTube. It'll be on Reels and TikTok or whatever. So if you don't have time to watch this whole video, you can always watch the short version. It'll have the recipe there too. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll be back with more whole food plant-based recipes that I hope you enjoy. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.